it was very interesting to us. And people that listen to our podcast are like, you're so strong. Like, I hope this heals you. And it is healing us. But our goal when we started this was not to heal our family. It was to help educate people. And I can tell you, yours is going to be one of the most educated podcasts. Not enough. I mean, we're laughing about it. No, but.
Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome to a podcast. Not only is this a podcast, but it's our... What's going on, guys? We're back to another episode of the podcast. We have two special guests today. That is Allie and Carrie.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Carrie, you used to work with my mom, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Allie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my name is Allie Merrifield, and I am a therapist, an addictions therapist. I work down in Maryland. I went to school a lot of years to be an addictions therapist, so that's me.
All right. Carrie, do you want to say anything?
Nope.
She's being forced to do this.
I'm here for support.
Well, that's good. So for those of you that have been listening so far, you guys missed a long conversation before this, and I wish we got it on the episode, but we didn't. So we were talking about whether it's a decision or not, a choice or not to be, I'm afraid to say anything because you might come at me now.
A person with an addiction.
Yeah, a person with an addiction. So if you guys remember back to, I think it was it number 3?
Second. I thought it
was number 3.
Oh, yeah, it was 3.
And the name of that podcast was, Is It a Choice or Not? And you hear my mom and Dylan arguing whether it's a choice or not. So we were talking about that before the podcast. Dylan doesn't believe you believe it is a choice.
Yeah.
So we were talking about that. And I don't know if you guys want to start there, and we'll go from there. So Dylan, do you believe it's a choice? And Allie was describing to you what she felt about that.
Well, she put it in good perspective for me. What would you say? You said about the depression.
Yeah, I asked you if you think depression or anxiety is a disease or a choice.
Yeah.
And you said that you think it's a disease.
Yeah.
And addiction is a mental health disease. So I asked you what's the difference between addiction or depression?
Yeah. So she put it in a different way that I actually understood it. So, yeah, changed my mind.
So are you all of a sudden just change your mind now?
I am, because if you think about it that way, you can't really just decide not to be depressed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So it's interesting because
The whole brain thing still messes with me, but
she's going to get into that. What's interesting about this whole story is we had that podcast about choice. I was trying to remember what people... Now she has me all flustered. Yeah. I don't want to say addicts, but users.
You can say addicts.
Like
it's
users gave me information, so I tried to use that to combat Dylan's choice situation, which anybody that listened to that podcast knew I failed miserably because he kept saying it's a choice and had me all flustered. But we had a previous podcast. Michelle was here 2 weeks ago, and she did not listen to all the podcasts before she came. We didn't know Michelle either. And what happened was she listened to the one about choice just the other day, and she texted me and said, I'm raging in my car right now. Which one of your sons is the one that I need to talk
You're welcome.
to? And so I laughed and I called Dylan. I'm like, yeah, you really made this one girl angry. Like, she was raging in her car. And he's like, for what? And I'm like, because you said it's a choice. Mm-hmm. And so when Carrie and Allie pulled up this evening, and I never met Allie before tonight, she started talking about how angry she was with my son when I said, that's Dylan and that's Austin. She said, oh. And so we got in this topic because she listened to the podcast and couldn't even finish listening to the podcast because Dylan was saying it was a choice. So the conversation before this podcast was very, very interesting, back and forth banter. And she finally convinced Dylan that the choice is taken away at some point.
Correct.
So if you want to explain the brain part to us, because everybody says to us, it's in the brain, and we're always looking for somebody that can kind of explain how the brain functions for a person using versus a non-person that doesn't use.
Sure. So a person who uses substances eventually will disrupt their pathways to be able to make rational decisions. And once those pathways are disrupted, it no longer becomes a choice. And then you also develop a physical dependence to many of the drugs. So then you actually need to use the substance to physically be able to function. But I was explaining a concept of neuroplasticity, which means our brains can heal themselves, but it takes a long time for new pathways to be channeled through the brain to get to the end result.
How long would you say? Is it different for everybody?
It is different with everybody, but it's long term. So, your simple 30-day inpatient stay, not enough time. Not enough time at all. The facility I work at is a long-term facility, about 6 to 9 months. Usually people are there far beyond 9 months.
Okay, so what happens to the person in recovery that has the time frame of like 5 or 6 years and then they relapse? Is that their brain still not healed, or is this just something else that triggers them to start using that again?
It could be both. It could just be that the pathways aren't exactly redeveloped yet, or it could be something that triggers them from the life of addiction, and then their senses are raised and the addiction part of the brain becomes activated and then takes over. So then they pick up and relapse.
Okay, so we've always heard people say once you're in addiction, every day for the rest of your life you have to make a choice. Mm-hmm. Is that a true fact? So there'll never be a day where their brain's healed enough that they don't think about that and have to fight that desire.
So that is true, because addiction is chronic, which means it's lifelong. So much like depression, some days you'll have bad days where you struggle to get out of bed. Other days you're fine and everything's great.
So depression is chronic?
Mm-hmm. Yes, depression is chronic. As long as you manage, your treatment, whatever that looks like, whether it's a 12-step meeting or therapy, surrounding yourself with positive people, healthy coping mechanisms like going to the gym, exercising. But yes, it is a choice. I say to my patients all the time, you're one choice away from a bad decision, like ruining everything. One decision is all it takes.
Interesting. Can you explain for us what a day's like in your job?
Yeah, like as far as, so someone has an addiction, what's that process like as far as them coming to you? Do people recommend you?
Yeah, so the facility that I work with, it's called the Maryland Addiction Recovery Center, and we are long-term, so it's difficult to get patients to come because when they hear average length of stay 6 to 9 months, they don't want any part of that. So usually when patients first get to us, they're kind of angry because they don't really want to be there. Yeah. Not everybody, though.
Are they forced by the courts to come to yours or no?
Not everybody.
Okay.
Some people are, but not everybody. Okay. But the days are different. They can change in an instant. But it's a lot of involving the family. It's a lot of pushing a sober network, going to meetings, getting a sponsor, a lot of internal work, going back to childhood, because more often than not, using drugs is the side effect of what really is going on for a person. So depression, for example, if somebody struggles a lot with anxiety or depression, their coping mechanism may be to use substances because it fixes the depression.
Makes sense.
Puts a Band-Aid over like a bleeding artery. Eventually it's not going to be enough, and then you have a whole new issue because then you develop the disease of addiction.
So these people that say, and we had one, I think, on this podcast, or I heard it at a meeting or something, I just did it recreational, just the party, like that's how I started. Mm-hmm. So do you believe that they had a hidden issue before that point and they went to that party and started using, or can people just start using without the hidden issue? They just like the party and try it?
It can be both.
Okay.
Most patients that I treat, there's a pre-existing condition, or there's a co-occurring condition rather, where it's paired with depression or anxiety or bipolar disorder or trauma, PTSD. So rarely do I meet a patient who solely has the disease of addiction only. Very rare.
That's interesting.
Yes, it is. So
I feel like I could talk to her all day.
Yeah,
she has like all the
She's
answers.
answering all the questions that we've had. So thank you for like reaching out, Carrie. I appreciate it.
She's like the internet sitting here.
Can you imagine if you would have researched this like 6 years ago?
I don't need to. Look, you're right here.
Okay,
This
you're
is
welcome.
what I was waiting for.
The bill's in the mail.
Well, in that case, I'm sorry I didn't come to meet you sooner.
It's okay.
So a person comes into rehab, because some of our listeners are not aware of anything with drug addiction or at all. I have no experience with what happens in a rehab. They come in, whether it's court ordered, on their own, desperation or whatever. Do they come in and then they detox?
It depends on the substance.
Okay.
Usually a person, if it's opiates or alcohol or benzodiazepines, which are like the Xanax, they will need to detox because it can be dangerous. Then they come to our facility. We're a partial hospitalization program, intensive outpatient program, and an outpatient program. So by the time a person gets to our facility, they're no longer in like active detox.
Okay.
So substances are cleared out of their body, which is actually when the real hard work begins.
Okay, so you don't deal with any of the sickness or anything, withdrawal or anything like that. They're already past that point when they get to you.
Correct.
Okay. And so you're a counselor.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see the same patients every day? Is there several of you and you see the same people, or do you do group therapy or individual?
All of it, yes.
Okay.
All of it. So I have a caseload, so I only do individual therapy with the patients that are on my caseload.
Okay.
But we run group therapy as well, every day, all day. Because the opposite of addiction is connection. It's actually not recovery, it's connection. Addiction is a disease of isolation. So we do a lot of group therapy and essentially try to force everybody to become connected with other people who are sick and suffering, because there's comfort in that.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I've been to a couple meetings and they're very close. The group is very close and they really depend on each other for everything.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So in other rehabs, I've heard that they stay as long as the insurance pays. Does the insurance, I know this is a whole other topic, but I always am interested in, do you release the person when the insurance is up? Is that person, quote, healed because they ran out of insurance?
That makes me a little insane because of the way our insurance company operates. They make the decision on when a person is ready to leave treatment, and that's ludicrous to me. The facility that I work at does not do that. If an insurance runs up, we don't ask people to leave or kick people out, because we try to be very like person first. And ethically, if you're not ready to be a functioning adult in society, it's not appropriate for you to leave our facility. But I have worked at treatment facilities who say, you only get 28 days authorized, which is...
Okay. Yeah, I heard that, and I just wanted to confirm that, because one of the things that we want to do as helping people is hitting these topics and trying to find ways to help, whether we reach out to senators or whatever we can do to get them to realize that insurance companies need to pay for more. Like, in the end, I always look at it like they only pay for 28 days, and then we have guests here that say, I've been there 22 times.
Yep.
So the insurance is paying for 22 30-day visits versus just pay for the whole daggone 9 months at one shot and get them better or functional, that they don't need to be in a rehab.
Yeah.
So that's a true statement that we need to get people on board.
It's an uphill battle, though, because a lot of people...
Easy.
think that addiction is a moral issue and a decision, and I'm not going to donate my money and spend my money so that you can go sleep soundly for 30 days just to leave and use again. So it's an uphill battle.
And that's the stigma, and that's what we're talking about. It's totally the stigma that they're not worth it. Okay.
So how about you tell us a little bit about where you went to school and stuff like that, where you learned all this?
So I started to learn about the disease of addiction actually once when I got to college, which is also a huge problem because there isn't much education around this topic until you decide to get education on it.
Right.
So I went to undergrad at York College and studied psychology and took some addictions courses and just became incredibly passionate about it. I then did my graduate degree at Grand Canyon University, and I actually then got a master's degree in addictions counseling, along with a professional degree. So I'm a licensed therapist for mental health as well, along with then the addiction component.
Was there a reason you went into this field and experience in your life that you chose to do this?
I have associated with people who struggle with addiction, and I was very aware that I never judged those people. I was more curious about what was going on. So I did my research.
Wow. Giving it right back.
And just like found that I wanted answers to all of these questions, because it didn't make sense to me that people would abuse their bodies like that because they wanted to. And I didn't believe that it was fun. So that's kind of where my interest started, and I leaned towards the addiction side. And throughout my career, some of the best people I know are in recovery.
I can relate.
Oh, totally. I mean, they're good people. And it affects them their whole life. Like, it goes through their jobs. Like, even once they're in recovery, like, they can't share at their employer. Like, they have to go and hope. And a lot of them have the records to go with it. A mother, we haven't heard this podcast yet. We recorded the other day, but the mother was sharing, like, it's hard to get jobs. It's hard to move on because it's constantly going to haunt you.
I don't agree with that.
And but it happens. I mean, it happens where we work. Like, they don't openly say when they're in an interview, well, I have addiction, I'm in recovery or whatever. Like, they just hope that their record is clean enough that they can get through so that they can get the position and prove themselves.
Gina said was that it's going to come to a point where everybody's going to struggle with addiction. There's not everybody, but like, it's going to be a lot bigger than what it is now. So it's going to be hard to find employees that haven't used drugs or have all like other addictions. You know what I mean?
Are you seeing it growing?
Yes.
The need for help and for these recoveries is growing. It's not getting any better. The more we're aware of it, it's still continuing to happen.
Probably due to our environment now.
It's especially bad now.
Yeah.
I mean, with COVID happening, people are isolated, and the amount of relapse that's happening and overdoses that we're, working through right now is bad.
So isolation's against what you believe, because you believe that everybody should be connecting.
Connection is what you need for recovery.
Would you say you ever had an addiction yourself? When you were learning about this stuff in school, were you like, hey, like, maybe I'm addicted to this, or not substance, but like anything in general?
So, no, but I thank my higher power for that, because I do struggle with a chronic condition, so I know what pain feels like.
Okay.
And I'm allergic to opiates, and I think that was God's doing, because if I wasn't allergic to opiates, I don't know what my story would be.
How'd you know you're allergic?
I ended up hospitalized from my disease, and they gave me morphine and pain meds to treat the pain, and reaction city occurred, without getting too graphic.
Okay, interesting.
But it helped the pain. So I was desperate.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So in your rehab that you work, do you follow the 12-step program? Okay.
We encourage it. We don't actually do any teaching on that, because we want our patients to go to meetings and find a sponsor and do that work separate, because 12-step work isn't treatment. It's self-care. It's necessary for recovery. Treatment is totally different, because one day you leave treatment and you still need to have your 12-step network.
So you don't believe in people taking morphine?
What do you mean?
That would be, the podcast we were on previous, that's against the 12 steps, because they're still technically using a drug.
No, that's they're talking about methadone.
No, I mean methadone, sorry.
Not morphine.
Methadone.
So the methadone, do you treat with methadone in your rehab?
We do not. We don't use any medicated assisted treatment.
Okay.
We do to detox, to help. Well, we don't, but facilities do to help detox. But no, we don't do any prescription like that.
So, all right. So Jackie, I don't know if you listened to that podcast yet or not.
Not yet. I'm coming down from
okay. That one was the hot topic. I'll just tell you, every other one you're either going to cry or laugh. But so Jackie shared with us, and her mother shared the story that she was going to rehab on a specific day. And she said she had to get high before she went to rehab because she couldn't go into the detox sick. So when they go into detox, and I didn't ask her this that day, when they go into detox, they are given medicine so that they don't have the side effects.
Yes.
So why wouldn't they want to go in sick? Like,
that's the disease talking, because it really
Okay.
makes no difference. A lot of people say that so they can get one more high before they go into treatment.
okay.
So usually it's like, I want one more bang before I.
Because I was
can't do this
confused by that. I'm
anymore.
like, well, if you're going in and they're going to detox you anyway. Like,
But, you know, if you go in high or under the influence and you start your detox, you won't. The goal would be that you don't experience any physical withdrawal symptoms.
okay.
And that's what people don't want.
So what's the process through detox that you don't get those symptoms?
They use medication.
Okay.
All sorts of medication. I'm not 100% familiar with what that looks like, because I never worked at a detox.
Okay.
But Suboxone is used, which is like methadone, same concept. Antipsychotics can be used, just lithium. It just depends
Okay.
what the symptoms are. But essentially, detox is treating the symptoms of what withdrawal looks like.
Okay. And then they come to you after the whole withdrawal thing.
Mm-hmm.
You don't believe in the methadone process in your facility.
Not in our facility, but me personally, I believe in what works for a person, as long as they're doing the next right thing.
So you've seen success in both cases.
My career started in a methadone clinic.
Okay. Okay. Because I've been to several different like town halls with WGAL, and there's conflict there. Even the 12-step program, correct me if I'm wrong, they are not allowed to use methadone in the 12-step program. Is that true?
That's
I
pretty
thought
true.
that's what I.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's seen as a crutch or a substitute high, or whatever, which it can be. People use it like that, which is why it's so controversial.
Okay. And that's why these drug dealers still sell like Suboxone. Like, I'm confused if Suboxone is to get you off of heroin, why drug dealers would sell you Suboxone. And the only reason I know that they sell Suboxone is because my son had Suboxone in his wallet when they gave me his wallet back. And so I opened it up and I'm like, what in the world is this? Like, what is this? And they explained it to me that he probably purchased that from a drug dealer to get off of the heroin. So why would a drug dealer sell you something that takes you away from the drug that they're selling?
If you take enough of it, it will get you very high, very under the influence. So if you go overboard, it's a high like heroin would be, or opiate or fentanyl or whatever.
Okay.
So
Interesting. And are you seeing more people on pills, opioid pills, or heroin, or we learned from
Fentanyl.
another person, fentanyl? Like, people are actually... So my son died of an overdose and it had fentanyl in it. They told me he probably didn't know because it was 6 years ago that there was fentanyl in it. Another person told us that fentanyl is like the new heroin now. Most of the people are buying fentanyl. They're calling it heroin, but they know that they're purchasing fentanyl. So you're seeing more people using fentanyl.
no, my clients primarily are struggling with alcohol.
And back to what you said before the podcast.
Okay.
That was alcohol is what would you say?
Alcohol and benzos are the most dangerous substances out there. You can actually die from withdrawing from those.
I'm curious. What's benzos? So is that short term for something? Or?
Yeah, benzos are the class of drugs that's like your Xanax, Ativans,
Okay.
those anti-anxiety ones.
So a lot of your clients are alcohol. Wow.
My caseload right now is primarily alcoholism, and their lives have been completely destroyed in the same kind of way as somebody who uses heroin or opiates.
And it affects their brain the same as using heroin.
Yep, the pleasure center of the brain is what's affected.
Dopamine.
Yeah.
Austin did some research.
Oh.
Can you talk
Well,
about that?
Are you twins? Because there's a lot of differences here.
There's no communication.
Can you talk about that a little bit, like dopamine, how that is released and stuff?
Yeah, so we have like natural dopamine, which is like exercise.
So when I'm going to the gym,
You're releasing natural dopamine, yeah.
Okay.
Substances like are a synthetic dopamine release. So when you are using drugs or alcohol or whatever you're using, you're like fake happy.
It's fake.
Right. It's synthetic, right? So all of these dopamines are being released because of the substances, and then that's what you start to need. So that's why you have a person who's maybe early in recovery that doesn't enjoy things that they used to enjoy, because the dopamine that's released when you use heroin, let's say, is 100%, but if you used to like to get on roller coasters, that's only going to be at like 4% because of the amount of dopamine that would be released on that activity. So you start to need more to feel the same kind of happiness or effect or whatever it is.
So you could do that with natural dopamine too, as far as like if I go to the gym.
Dude, I was just going to ask that same question.
They're twins.
Well, go ahead and ask it. Go ahead and ask
No,
it.
you're good. You're doing good.
Well, now I forget where I was
That
going
way
with
she
it.
can
So-
yell at you, not me.
So you said the synthetic, you need that
It's a better release of
synthetic-
dopamine.
It's
so,
more. It's way more.
So
So
you can't
with
get that effect
natural,
with
with
natural.
natural things like not drug related, can you get more of a high in dopamine off one activity over the other, and it takes over? Like you don't, like you just said, you have.
Can your brain release synthetic dopamine without using the drug?
Not as much. So yes, like we naturally, our brains release dopamine with activities like exercise.
And synthetic.
No, it's not. It's not synthetic. It's just a rush of dopamine because of the drug
Okay.
attacking that receptor.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, receptors. I kind of know what you're talking about.
So like you use drugs in like dopamine city, like all over this receptor, but you go to the gym and like dopamine for a little bit, and then you got to do something else. But if you're using substances, it's like bouncing around a lot,
Gotcha.
overflowing.
Gotcha. Tori, you getting on all this? You don't know anything? I'm just.
Comment her.
I was just curious.
So I'm just curious. So, what's the process of detoxing for alcohol? The same thing? Would you use, if someone comes in there and they need a detox from alcohol, they would use Suboxone or things like that, or no?
Not necessarily Suboxone because it's a different receptor.
Okay.
Alcohol and opiates are different receptors, but they would need medication to help the severity of it.
What kind of medication?
I'm
She
not
didn't do
positive.
detox.
Yeah, I don't know what we use with alcohol detox. Sometimes benzos, the Xanax and the Ativans, just to keep things calm.
So, what age group are you seeing? Since it's alcohol, I'm just curious. Is it still the young people?
Mm-hmm. My youngest was 18.
Okay.
My oldest was 64, 65.
I thought you were talking about your kids.
No,
How old are you?
no kids.
That's another topic.
Addiction does not discriminate. It
No.
doesn't care who you are, where you come from, what your experiences are. It will take over.
Is it easier to recover from alcohol versus the drug, or does it? I know I asked this question, does it affect the brain? And you said yes, but is it easier to recover from alcoholism versus drug addiction?
It's hard to compare because they can look exactly the same or they can be different, and that depends on family and network, willingness. I mean, there's so many factors that go into play when a person wants to recover. The drug that you used can really be irrelevant because if you don't have support, family, all of that, chances are greater that you'll go back.
So in theory, I'm sitting here thinking, I could be an alcoholic. I just don't know it yet.
Do you want to talk about that?
You can. Yeah.
Are you drinking too much?
No, I
maybe?
don't. No, I'm saying. I'm saying I don't drink at all.
Oh, okay.
But if I do start, I could be an alcoholic, but I never tried it. I never got to that point, right?
Yeah.
Same with drugs. I
Yeah.
could be an addict as well.
You could possess the genetic component or environmental factors that would lead a person to develop the disease of addiction.
You believe everybody would be like that? Everybody could.
It depends. It depends on nature, nurture, genetics.
Based off what the drug affects, how it affects you, I would say almost everyone could become an addict if you took a certain drug.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you like the
If you
feeling.
take too much of it and it does enough damage, then yeah.
Yeah.
So is it hereditary? So if you have a mother or a father
Oh, yeah, this
that's
is a good
using
question.
drugs
Mhm.
and their child uses drugs, do you believe that it's hereditary? There's a hereditary gene?
So there is. That's scientific fact.
Oh.
Down
Wait.
to the. Now you're gonna
Wait,
ask
wait,
me.
wait, wait. No. What was your belief before she answers this? Because I remember you were talking to me about this, about the twin thing, or was it the brothers or something like that?
Well, we talked about it because we have two sisters that were both addicted. Like, is it hereditary? And in my opinion, I wasn't sure if it was a chemical that caused it to be hereditary or just because they lived with it, like they saw their mother using drugs, because that's happening a lot as little kids are watching their parents use drugs and go through that whole children's services and all that stuff. So my thought always was, if they use drugs, it's because that's what they saw their parents do. So my question is, are you telling us that there could be a gene that causes them to become that user as well?
There is a gene that will predispose you to develop addiction. Down to the actual, they identified the gene that it is. Don't ask me what it is because I don't know.
What is it?
But I don't know.
I'm
I'll
very
find out.
disappointed.
That's your homework.
I'm fired.
She's not Google.
Where's my phone? But yeah, they've identified where it actually falls. So there is a genetic component. Now, you may possess that and not develop addiction, or you might. It's like a perfect triangle on how you were raised, your life experiences, and whether or not there's a genetic predisposition to it.
So do they ever consider in research, if a father or mother is using drugs and they believe it's that, whatever, we're not sure what it is, whatever that is, that they would give that child something before they develop that disease? Like, that would go against that gene, that would fight that gene so that they wouldn't have that part of the triangle at least.
I don't know.
Okay.
I would
That's
think
interesting.
I would think you're I'll do that. I think with your question, it's more environmental. Like, when you're seeing that stuff, you're in a not so good environment when you're growing up, so they kind of tend to lean towards something else. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, yeah, I get the gene thing. Yeah, it could be in your genes that you have the addictive personality, but I think in your instance, what you're trying to get out of this is it's more the environment. That's my opinion. Like, the kids are growing up in it, so they feel like, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's just my concern. Like, this disease is growing, whether it's alcohol or drugs, it's continuing to grow and we can't stop it. So what's the after effect? All these kids that are doing it now, their kids, if they have this gene or they have what they saw your environment around you, it's just going to keep increasing. How do we stop it from snowballing? And that was one of my thoughts is, if it's a gene, do we stop that? Is there something that we can do that can stop that gene?
Yeah, stop the environment, the bad environment.
But it's still
don't put that in their head.
Yeah, but there's still a gene. That's
yes,
just
but they
talking
don't.
about.
Yeah, but they don't know that if they're not in that environment.
I understand, but the gene is in their system.
He's
so,
saying if they're not exposed.
If they're not exposed to it, then they don't know anything about that
for
gene.
the
Or
gene, for the
do you
gene,
get what I'm saying? It's still a
I
gene.
get what you're
we
saying
understand,
too.
yeah.
Yes.
the gene's in you.
Carrie.
But he's saying if it,
Carrie, please help them.
I can't.
if, the,
We're splitting hairs.
if there's not that outside force to,
Splitting hairs, right?
not that outside force to bring it to you, then how are you gonna know if you have
Yeah.
that gene or not?
I would say parenting is how you fix it.
He's going to be a father soon in
Can't fix
January.
Yeah, I'm being serious.
How do you fix the
think
gene?
parenting. It's not the gene. It's the environment that you grow up in.
But they have proof, scientific proof, that this gene...
I'm not saying that's going to completely get rid of it.
causes-
That's not true, because you hear stories about addicts that grow up in a good family environment, and that's where maybe the gene kicks in. But then you have kids that don't know anything about drugs because they're never introduced to it, or they didn't grow up with it. You know what I mean? So then that your gene don't matter.
It's still a part of it. She's shaking her head yes because I'm on the
Then
same
I agree.
level with
I
her.
agree with her. If she's shaking her head yes, then I agree with her.
I understand. It's
I mean, there
yep.
can also be no rhyme or reason. I mean,
Yep.
I've had patients who have zero predisposition. There's no family history of addiction. They grew up in a good family, and somewhere along the way, addiction came into play.
And it could just been a mental issue
Could
that
have
they
been.
had or some trauma that happened to them as a child that stuck with them for until they couldn't deal with it anymore, and so that was their escape.
Right.
Do you recommend everyone should have a therapist or should go see one? Because how do we know we have I wouldn't say a problem, but something wrong with us if nobody else exposes it. So I can go throughout my daily life and not know that maybe I have depression, but unless I do my research, right?
Oh, he quoted that. He
Right?
air quoted that. Oh.
You know what I'm saying? So do you agree that we should all like see a therapist or?
I mean, I think it's good self-care for people to see a therapist. It's not necessary, but
Yeah, I agree.
you know, if there's nothing going on in your life that's disrupting your ability to live your life, then you know, you're probably okay. Or if there's people around you that aren't constantly coming to you with concerns like, hey, what's going on? You seem different, you're angry. Like if that's not happening, then you know, there's no reason for you to go fishing for some kind of disease you may or may not have.
And then other people are really good at hiding it.
Other people are really good at hiding it and go on living their lives and working a job, and no one will ever know until it's too late.
Till it's a breaking point.
Till it's a
That's
breaking
me.
point.
And that's stigma too, because I mean, my kids came to me a couple months ago and said, "You're depressed." I'm like, "No way! Like, I don't know what you're talking about. I know what I want. I'm not depressed." And all of a sudden, I started Googling and researching it, and I had to come to my own conclusion that, you know what, I am depressed. And I did go seek counseling. I'm in counseling right now, and a lot of people go to counseling, but
I recommend her.
Allie, for you or for your mom?
For anybody.
we'll set that appointment.
Okay,
up.
all right.
I quit my first counselor. I didn't go back. I'm on my second one now, and she's doing okay. But I could be a hard patient too. But that's stigma too. Like, people don't want to admit that that they have a problem. And I never thought of it as a disease. And now tonight I learned that it's a disease, along with me being diabetic. Or did I say that correctly?
Having diabetes.
I have diabetes. I'm not diabetic. I have diabetes. So I have.
Because you're a mother, you're a wife, you're
Okay.
a daughter, you're lots of things, right?
Okay. So it's interesting that stigma, it always comes back to stigma, whether people get help or don't get help or whatever. And this is just, I mean, drug is one thing, depression is another thing. They're all diseases
Right.
that we have to handle. So that's very interesting.
And in my opinion, the stigma actually is I see it the most within the addiction community. So people usually come in to treatment stigmatizing, if that's a word, themselves more than the people in their lives.
I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Are you saying beating themselves up and,
Yep.
and blaming themselves?
I deserve nothing, I'm a piece of shit. They judge themselves harder than the people in their lives.
And that's funny that you say that, because other people that I talk to, when they're talking to people that are actively in addiction, they describe themselves, if it was them or someone that they're around, as being very selfish and not caring. And it goes back to a meeting that I went to that I shared on the last podcast, where the boy stood up and said, "I don't want to do this to my mother." So they come across as being arrogant and selfish, but all of the individuals that I've met going through recovery, they have that soft side underneath that big exterior that they carry, and they think they're cool. Like, I'm cool. Like, I do this. I do these drugs. They talk about, like, yeah, have you ever did this or whatever, but underneath they're afraid and they don't know how to help themselves. And I've learned that through a lot of the people that I meet, that it makes sense that they come and stigmatize themselves.
Right.
But to the world, they're strong, hardcore, like, I got this. Okay, good.
Yeah, because I remember that meeting we had here, which I don't know if we're allowed to bring this up, but we had a meeting here, and we literally went around the table, and these guys were, like, letting their hearts out about their struggles and stuff like that. The meeting was over, and I'm sitting there. I didn't say anything in the meeting, so maybe they were judging me on maybe what I was thinking or whatnot. But as soon as the meeting was over, you guys left and stuff. But they were down there talking about all this crack and drugs they did. Like, they were bragging about it almost just in front of me because I didn't say anything. So I don't know. It was weird. And they have the soft side. I just listened to it. Now you're going to show me the other side. Like, are you trying to protect yourself from me? Like, I don't judge. So nobody should judge.
Probably, yes. That's probably what they were doing. Because if I can control your preconceived notion of me, then you don't have to do it. Right? If I can keep you out here at arm's length and let you know all of these things that I did, like...
You're putting yourself out there.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what I explained to him later, because obviously I stepped away from the group and I was not there, and he said, well, that's weird, because he just saw him like explaining like everything about what hurts them and how they want to help themselves and be good, and then all of a sudden we're out of the situation. They knew that Austin wasn't a user before the meeting. Obviously, you know how that works. You go around and say if you're a user or not. Austin and I were not users. We were just there as support. I was a support, and he was just there because they came here, and he was interested in learning what the addiction is about, because we were trying to understand where Kyle came from, because Kyle didn't tell us. So we're like, can we learn? And that's how this whole thing got started. I just wanted to learn, like, what happened to him? Why did this happen to us? And so we got involved in that. So when he told me that afterwards, I even remember I even said to you, that was them, because they were being so vulnerable and sharing and their soft side, and one of them had tears. Like, it was a very emotional meeting. And then all of a sudden it's that stigma. Oh my gosh, like, this guy, he's
but it shouldn't be like that. I don't agree with that.
He's got his shit together, and we
That's
just
what they
support
think.
ourselves, and that's what they think. And so she's making sense of it. That's
stigmatized against themselves, because I just
against
let you
themselves,
in.
yeah.
I told you all these vulnerable things about me, but don't get too close, because I did all these terrible things too.
Yeah. And I didn't speak the whole time, so they had no idea what was going through my head.
So all they knew is that he was my son. They knew me, not a lot about me, but knew why I had them here. And he came along for the experience, and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, now. And I explained that to him, because afterwards he's like, I don't know about this. And I'm like, I'm telling you, like, they're good people. It's just they had to put that wall back up.
Correct.
So do you hear the part in the podcast about the choice about when we speak about normal? There's no such thing as normal.
Yeah, I hate that word.
So do I. I don't believe in it.
I don't either. Normal is actually not normal.
It's average.
For a person to be, quote, normal, that's
There's
the
no
minority.
such thing.
Yeah, that doesn't exist. That's not normal to be normal.
So when people say that we're normal because we're not users.
Normies. Have you heard that?
I never heard that.
Normies. You're a normie. What do you know?
That'd be annoying. That'd be really annoying. But yeah, people that pisses me off, and I get frustrated. We just did a podcast, and we were talking, and she's like, "You guys just like live a normal life, and you guys are so normal." I hate that. I told her right away. I was like, "Don't call me normal. I have my own problems. You guys maybe not see, but yeah, don't call me normal, or hopefully not normie, because
I'm gonna call you that for now on. What's up, normie?
norms."
That's actually a huge barrier that I have with treating this population, because everyone wants to know if I have the disease of addiction or if I'm in recovery. Because if you're not, you don't understand me. You can't help me.
Because they can relate right away.
They think they can't relate to me. Just because I don't personally have an addiction with substances, then they're like, well, then you there's nothing you can do for me. You can't help me. Because I'm a normie. But they don't know anything about my life. Right? I actually have an interesting... Have I ever told you this analogy, Carrie? I have an interesting analogy. When my patients come to me and say, are you in recovery? And if I decide to be honest with them, because sometimes I say, like, that's none of your damn business, but...
You really say that to them?
Yeah.
Okay.
She yells at her patients. Yes, I do.
Were you ever her patient, Carrie?
Sometimes. Not my choice.
I don't think she'd be sitting here right now. I don't think she'd be sitting here right now.
Obviously.
We've been friends since we've been 5. So.
Okay, good.
That's true.
Good.
But then, a lot of patients don't want to work with me because, they're saying, well, you don't understand what I've been through. So I actually say to them, okay, well, what you're essentially saying is, if you have a heart attack and you die and you're dying on the floor right here next to me, do you want me to go get somebody to save your life who also had a heart attack one time because they know what you're going through? Or do you want me to go get a heart surgeon who has been to school for all of the years to be able to save your life? Like, what's the difference between that? And that usually shuts them up, and then they call me a bitch or whatever. But you know,
Oh, that's interesting.
but that's essentially what they're saying. They don't want somebody trained 4 years postgraduate in this disease, knowing ins and outs and everything I can possibly know about it. They want me to go find someone who also was in recovery because that will make them feel safer.
And some facilities require you to be in recovery to work there.
Yeah.
Do you have that in your facility?
No.
Okay, so it's not a requirement.
The requirement is for all of the therapists to be licensed in our facility.
Okay.
Could you compare that to like a personal trainer? So a personal trainer out of shape, someone comes to you, you're gonna be like, no, I'm not. You're not gonna be my trainer. You're out of shape.
Yeah.
Same thing, technically.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if a personal trainer is licensed to be a personal trainer, they obviously know what to do. They
should
know
be in
all
shape.
of the ins and outs. I mean, maybe they should be, but it's their choice. They don't have to be able to do their job well.
Job point.
I
Like they
can tell
should
you
be.
one thing. If I'm looking for a trainer, it ain't you because you're tiny.
I won't go there.
So I like that you went to the training, and so we're always very careful in these podcasts to say we understand, because obviously we've never used in our situation, and everybody at this table never used a drug. So when they talk about their drug use, we have to say, we can't ever say we understand, because we don't understand. In your case, you went to school and you're educated, so you have the knowledge.
I have the knowledge, but also I know what pain feels like. I know what it feels like to be depressed. I know what it feels like to be sad. I know what it feels like to have no way out. Like, I know what these things feel like. I don't need to use substances to know what that feels like.
Do you think all of us know what it feels like?
Yes.
Everything you just described.
Yeah. Have you ever been in pain for any
Yeah.
reason?
Yeah, I
So
have.
you know what pain feels
I
like.
have stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Just because you don't stick a needle in your arm or drink a fifth every night doesn't mean that you don't understand what it feels like to go through pain, emotional, physical, mental, whatever.
I think we might have a fight coming on our hands. Not here. But the users that go through the pain, all of them that explained it to us in every podcast, or even not even in podcasts, say you can't even imagine. It's worse than having babies. This pain
Have
is
these people
so terrible.
But that's your
so,
pain- that's
ever
your
had
pain tolerance,
babies?
though.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just
It's
like,
based off your pain tolerance.
but how many of them told? I'm just saying,
Yeah, I know,
stating what they share. Like, they're
Sure,
like, you
sure.
can't even imagine how bad this is. And so you're saying we all experience pain. I mean, I've had babies, so I've had that pain.
Everybody experiences
Everybody
pain.
experiences
It's
pain and
different-
has
it's
different
different
tolerance
levels.
too.
Different
There's
levels.
different levels of pain.
I agree with that. There's lots of different levels of pain, but I can't compare my pain to your pain.
Right.
You would never be able to.
It's exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So for them to say this is the worst pain that anybody can ever endure is their opinion.
And I
Because
believe, and
they
I believe,
don't know.
correct.
Okay.
But I believe that what they're saying is true. This is the worst pain they've ever endured in their life. I believe that. But I also can't compare it to the worst pain that you've ever endured. Because
Yeah.
I can't. I didn't endure your pain.
Understood. This is good.
Yeah, I like this. This is
This is good. Dylan wasn't going to come tonight. He thought it might be boring. I think this is very educational and interesting.
Yeah, I like it.
And this all comes down to like treatment and what people want to do, because those people that want to like split hairs and get into this like pissing contest, it will be very hard for them to recover because they're still trying to clench on to whatever sense of control they still want to clench onto. But recovery is about surrendering. Like, you have to drop the rope and listen and try and do something that maybe you don't want to do because people are telling you to do it because it worked for them. Right? If I'm going to stand in here and like puff my chest out and say my addiction's worse than your addiction or my pain is worse than your pain, that's hard to work with that. Because
Okay.
what does that matter
True.
in the reality?
But some people would take that and look at it as they would downgrade themselves almost.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
and,
all on how we take it in and handle it.
that's something that I would want that person to look at, like in therapy. Why do you have this need to feel like your addiction is worse than anyone else's?
For the attention.
So then what is that need for attention? Like, where did this come from? Where you go lengths to try to be the best worst.
Maybe it's the way they grew up. Maybe they never had the attention. I don't know.
Exactly. So then we can work with that. I
Yeah.
can work with that if you're telling me all of these things. This is why I feel this way.
Gotcha.
Do they open up to you?
Most do.
Would it be based off trust?
Yeah. Building rapport is about trust,
Yeah.
for sure.
How do you build that?
I meet them on their level. If they're wanting to know a little bit about like who I am and where I come from, and I feel like it's appropriate, I'll tell them. And when I do that, so far in my almost 10 years of experience, 10 times out of 10, they apologize to me for treating me the way that they were. Like, oh, you can't help me because XYZ. When I tell them a tiny bit of my story, they apologize to me.
So what's your success rate, would you say, in a long term? Because I've only been familiar with people that go to rehab like 30 days. And we heard Jackie say, 14 to 22 times in the rehab. Like, because yours is long term, do you still see quite a few of them coming back to that facility?
We do. But the success rate is higher than a short term, than a 30-day in and out. And it's like maintenance. You have to maintain. You have to continue to treat your addiction.
Reps.
Right. If you leave treatment and leave everything there, you'll get weaker, right? You'll go backwards, and then that's when you're the most vulnerable.
So do they go from inpatient to outpatient in your facility, or is it strictly in or out and then they're released?
So it's all about like hours of treatment per week.
Okay.
So we offer 25 hours of therapy a week as our highest level of care, which is partial hospitalization. And then we do like a step down process from 25 hours to maybe 15 hours to then 10 hours, then 5 hours, then 2 hours. And we just kind of do a slowly but surely step down. And in that step down process, we also reintroduce them to like vocational stuff. We help them get a job. We help them maintain what that looks like and stressors associated with that. If kids want to go back to school, or if people want to go back to school, not kids, we help them with that and, get transcripts and help like slowly reintegrate them back into normal society.
I'll say that.
With the normies.
With the normies.
I say average.
Average. I like that. All right. Average society. Because people aren't going to be successful if they just leave treatment and then go. The skills haven't been developed because of brain damage from using the substances. And
so the partial, do they stay overnight?
No, they don't have to.
Okay.
They can come and do group from 9:30 to 3:15 with an hour for lunch is our partial hospitalization program, with then an individual session with your primary therapist.
Okay, and how do you prepare them? Do you have a social worker that works with them once they're released, or?
The goal is to get them functioning enough to be able to leave with their support network that they created, and then maybe an aftercare individual therapy or individual therapist. But we don't want to release them from treatment into treatment again, because that's not sustainable. So along the way, like, we have a position at our facility of a vocational specialist. They work with them with job search stuff. We have a collegiate recovery specialist if they want to go back to school. So we have people to help navigate through all of these areas, phases of life. But essentially, when we discharge a patient, it's when we feel that they're clinically and, ready to function successfully.
What kind of signs
outside.
are you looking for?
Stress management, being able to navigate interviews, time management, setting boundaries, healthy boundaries with family or with other people, financial independence.
So it's almost like you're putting them through test.
Yeah, sort of, but we want to sustain it as they leave then. Right? So we don't want them just to get a job to have a job. Like, we talk to them about what are your goals, what do you want, and then help find something in that area. Because more often than not, they have zero experience in jobs, communicating with people, interview skills, budgeting, because the life is just consumed with maintaining their addiction.
Do you encourage or discourage recovery houses and sober houses from them moving from that facility or living in a recovery or sober house?
Ideally, when they discharge from our program, we don't want to send them to a recovery house, because by then we want them to have either a roommate with somebody that they met in recovery or financial independence so they can have their own place. We never want them to go back home with family. So
Because they fall back into that same routine, like.
yeah, often. And same thing with families too. Families really, really struggle and oftentimes relapse in their own program by doing enabling behaviors or doing things that trigger the addicted person that then will contribute to them going back out.
Is there any training for the family?
Not much, which is a huge disservice in the addiction world. But we have a huge family component at our facility. We actually have a family therapist who solely works with the families. We do family weekends, like family recovery programming. Some patients we require it. Some families we require it. But we try to steer people to Al-Anon, recovery coaches. But there isn't much other than those parent support groups, things like that.
Because just to your point, if they're being released and put back into the same situation, it's hard.
And oftentimes when a patient is graduating from our program, they had to set very, very strict boundaries with their families because their families were not willing to do any work.
And at some point, the families are just disgusted. Like, they put these families through hell. They stole and they did so much. It's hard for the family to accept them. I know sometimes that's hard for me because I say to myself, you should be so happy that they're still alive and that you can still help them. When you lose a child, like, we don't have that chance. Like, I can say for myself, and I don't know about how he feels, if I would have known, I would have went through any hoop that I had to go through. But I don't have that experience. Like, he didn't steal from us and we didn't have to do that. But I can imagine as a parent, some parents are just done with it. Like, they're bankrupt. They've lost everything, refinanced their houses, and they've just had enough. So I'm just always curious, like, they need to get guidance too. Like, they need to get over it and get healed.
Because it's
as
a trauma.
Well. It sure is.
It's a trauma when you have a loved one that's addicted, that has the disease of addiction. It's traumatic.
And you don't see them getting them back. Like, they always, you hear the stories like he's not ever going to be the way he was before. And they truly believe that. And they never will. Like, to your point, I don't know if it was on the podcast or you just said it before the podcast. Like, when you lose somebody to addiction or go through this experience, you're never the same again. I think we talked about that before the podcast. So that was an interesting statement that you made. Like, our lives changed the day Kyle passed, and it'll never be the same.
Right.
Ever. Like, even if we wish it to be and we say we're not affected by it, it's never going to be the same just because it happened.
Right.
And their dad suffers with post-traumatic stress, and so he's going to have that for the rest of his life. Regardless of who talks to him and the things that he's been learning through these podcasts and being able to talk about it, he's still going to have that forever.
Right. It's chronic, just like any other disease.
So you can't be healed from post-traumatic stress.
It can be managed,
Right.
but as far as cured, that's not accurate or
What kind of
possible.
ways do you recommend to manage it
To manage
post?
post-traumatic stress?
Yeah.
Trauma therapy. Finding a therapist who specializes in trauma, which I can do if you're interested.
Well, it's interesting because he has it. And I'm just going to be honest here. Sometimes we don't understand, or we'll get in an argument and I'll feel like he's not being sensitive to me because I also lost a son. I don't have post-traumatic stress because I lost Kyle. He has it because he lost Kyle. So when we get in our arguments, he always says to me, "You don't understand. I have post-traumatic stress." And my first comeback is, well, do something about it. Because I get that he has it, but it's frustrating because I suffer not from post-traumatic stress. I've never been diagnosed with it. He has. So he can get counseling for that, and I understand that it'll never go away. And we fight because sometimes I might need that support, and he can't be that support because he struggles with it himself.
And it's very much like addiction. Like, your experiences of that day are very different. Even though you all were there that day, everybody has a different experience of what happened. And you can't compare experiences because you just can't unless you're in each other's bodies.
Yeah.
So
And you listened to that podcast.
I
You
did.
listen? Okay.
I did.
So that was very interesting for us because, as you said, we all experienced something different. And it literally took us 6 years to hear what each of us experienced. And we were like, and you heard it in the podcast, we're like, oh, I didn't realize that happened. Oh, I don't remember that. Oh, you felt that way.
Right.
And it was very interesting to us. And people that listen to our podcast are like, you're so strong. Like, I hope this heals you. And it is healing us. But our goal when we started this was not to heal our family. It was to help educate people. And I can tell you, yours is going to be one of the most educated podcasts. Not in I mean, we're laughing about it. No, but you're here and everything helps. Like, people can relate to the people that are sharing their stories, to the Dom and the Tias and the Jackies and the Ginas and the Michelles that we spoke with. But this is a unique podcast because this is educational. This is things that people need to hear and understand, to understand what exactly goes on when you go to a rehab, or the brain thing like Dylan just learned tonight himself. You know, it's educational. So tonight's an educational podcast, and that's going to help a lot of people out there. And we're growing, and it's crazy. Like, we didn't know you, and Carrie reached out to me, and it just goes through words.
Scary.
Like,
Yep. You're welcome.
How you
You're
doing,
welcome,
Bob?
Dylan.
but you know, it's word of mouth, and it's so interesting to us. So while we're learning, I had a girl say to me, how in the heck do you sit there and hear a person tell you that your son introduced the needle to that person? How are you not traumatized by that? And it's weird because we're not. Like, we want to know. We want to know what happened or how it happened. Like, we're not finished yet. Carrie talked to me about the little girl thing, and she's like, we need to figure this little girl thing out.
I want to know about that.
We want to know about that. Like, we're not finished yet. So we don't want people to think, oh my gosh, like, they're just doing this to heal and they're so strong. Like, that's not why we're doing it. We're doing it to educate. And that's why I always ask questions like, how do we help our Congress? Like, what do we go to our Congress about? Like, how do we get the insurance companies to approve more days and save? We learned about the methadone, like in the epidemic, they pay for this a lot of times out of their own pocket, and they don't have money right now, so they're not using their methadone to help them if that's their choice, and they feel that they need that. So there's so many different topics that we want to go to. And I'm an advocate. I have no problem reaching out to senators, Congress, or whatever. Like, that's always been my goal, to do whatever helps. So this has been educational. And I know that's one of the topics, is the insurance part of it.
It's a stigma that stops that from happening.
Yep.
Well, don't you also offer scholarships at your facility?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Scholarships for the patients?
For treatment. Mm-hmm. And because everybody's situation is different and needs are different. So, you know, we do the very best that we can to help save people's lives.
Awesome. And that's what it's about. Like, your job, I can tell you're passionate about your job and you want to help people. You don't go to work. No, that's awesome. Because
Definitely
how
not
many
a normie.
people, you're not a normie.
I'm not a normie. No.
Definitely not.
Maybe an educational normie.
But how many people hate their job? And if you hate your job in a position like that, anytime you're dealing with psychology or people, and you see it, like, you can go to counselors and they look miserable. Like, they're like looking at their watch. Oh, is your hour up yet? Like, oh my God. And it happens. Like, you can see it when they come in the waiting room and call your name.
True. You don't do it. I'm
You're
saying
getting called out right now.
No, Allie's very passionate about her patients.
I am.
She like lives them, basically.
I've dedicated my
I
life.
saw you over there
to this.
checking your watch out. Trying to figure out when this is over.
She's
had
on
a
call.
long day today.
Yeah.
This week and last week has been especially difficult. I hate this disease, but I love my job.
Why do you think it's difficult? Because of the pandemic?
We've lost some patients. We've had some patients relapse.
And that's tough.
It just never gets easy.
That's the tough part of your job, because you do care, and then you have to deal with the loss as well.
Yeah.
And that's disturbing, I'm
and
sure.
then go run group in 15 minutes, you know?
Yeah, that's disturbing. So we appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
We hope there's more people like you. I'm sure there's more people like you out there. I always said that I would love to do something like that, but I'm a very emotional person. Carrie can attest to that.
She's
I
emotional
cry.
though,
Is she?
too.
Like I feel like I would be crying all the time. And
So
now
do you ever get attached to the people that you work with?
Every single one.
Yes.
So that
I
makes
remember
it
the
that makes
name
it
of
harder.
everybody I've ever treated and lost. All
So
of them.
that makes it harder for you.
And do they ever follow up with you?
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Are you friends with any of them?
I'm not friends with any of them, just from
Okay.
ethical standpoint. But I do maintain some communication, just like through email, professional email.
Okay.
One of my previous patients was recently in a horrible car accident, and I'm in contact with him every single day. But he was a previous patient, and I don't.
So there's a policy there, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like I'm not Facebook friends with any of them,
Okay.
or anything like that. But.
So it's difficult. So
Yeah.
we're laughing and stuff, and we're appreciating everything you do. But I don't think until you just said that I resonate with. You deal with a lot of death. So we're talking about post-traumatic stress, and obviously it was a son. But the counselors have to deal with that too. Like you get close to people, and it just hit me.
Yeah.
That's even tough on you. Like that's crazy. So it affects families, but it affects friends, but it affects the workers. You put your heart into these people, and you get to know them and know that this is not what they want.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing that, and
Of course.
you're saving people.
I'm trying.
Yep.
I'm
And
trying.
it really does.
It's not up
suck.
to me though.
Nope, I know.
It's up to the patients.
It just sucks.
Their
The whole
choice.
disease sucks.
So you
That was Austin, by the way. That was Austin.
It's their choice to try to get help.
Yes. So thank you from all of us.
Yeah.
so your facility is in Maryland. Do they have long-term facilities in Pennsylvania that you know of?
None that I know of.
Really?
None that I know of. Now, if you have good insurance or you continue to pay, then you can stay at your treatment facility. But it depends on the treatment facility, I suppose.
So we need more of your facilities in Pennsylvania for sure.
I would agree. More of our facilities across the country.
But I would say healthcare is different in every state as well, right? Like Pennsylvania has state help. Maryland would have, so maybe their rules are even different as far as recovery and what they pay.
But you have people out of state, not just all from Maryland.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a lot of people out of state. I can't answer that. I don't know much about insurance
Yeah.
or cost or any of that, which is what I love about my company, because I don't have anything to do with insurance. People do that who do that. Like I was hired to do a job that involves psychotherapy and group, and that's all they expect me to do. Now there's a lot obviously attached with all of that, but
The financial is out of your mind.
yeah, I don't have any idea of what any of that is, which is really fun when patients look at me and they're like, "Oh, you just want my money." Those are my favorites. Those are my favorites.
Because I get it all. I
Oh
profit
yeah.
from
Oh
this.
yeah.
No, because it's kind of cool that you don't know that. So they don't come to you and say this person is eligible for this amount of days, and you try to heal them in that amount of days. You're healing them because that's what you do. You
Right.
don't know when their time is up.
Yep, their time is up when clinically, as a team, we
Nice.
decide their time is up, not because the money's out or
I
whatever.
love that. That's nice. Because I hear too many times that if yours is 28-day insurance, you're healed in 28 days. If you're in rehab for the 5th time and you only needed it for like 15 days to get, but your insurance pays for 30, you need 30. And like that just blows my mind. Just crazy.
I mean, I don't know if anybody can make a serious life change and sustain it with only doing it for 28 days. Like if you think of like a diet,
yes.
like it just takes way more just to change a habit, let alone maintain
Exactly.
and like change behaviors and treat an addiction or a
Exactly.
disease.
Well, you
this
guys
has
got
been
anything
hot.
else to say?
This is good. This is really good.
I do have a question back to the alcohol being your number one, I guess, patients. You said about it being the most dangerous because you can die from the withdrawal.
Correct.
Can you die from any other drugs withdrawals?
Benzos, which are the Ativans and the Xanax,
Okay,
but
that was just my question.
you can't die from heroin withdrawal. Can't die from fentanyl withdrawal. That doesn't kill you.
Okay.
You
So
feel
what-
like you're dying.
So what kills you with the alcohol? Like I know I've heard people die of drinking too much alcohol, consuming alcohol, but the withdrawal part of it, if they're not drinking and they're coming through the withdrawal, is it heart attack related or?
I'm not 100% sure the medical reasons behind it, but seizures, strokes, like organ failure that is irreversible?
Irreparable.
Yeah. Irreparable. Yeah, that one. I watched a woman die from alcohol withdrawal when I was very early in my career, and it was one of the worst things I've ever seen.
And they
way
can't help
worse.
that person. So we have Narcan that helps with the overdose of the opioids. There's nothing that you can help when you see a person going through alcohol withdrawal.
So you can with medication to help them come off of it, but it just depends on the damage that was done, whether or not a person dies. We didn't think that she was going to die, but she ended up dying.
Okay.
Well, Tori, you got any questions?
I do.
She's coming over.
Just a quick one. So, like, I know in hospitals when they have, like, patients that they know are alcoholics, they actually have alcohol there to give them. Is that, like, because of the withdrawal? I know they keep, like, little things of vodka.
Yeah, so it's because of the withdrawal. So if there's an alcohol-related injury or emergency where a person has to be in the hospital, if you don't want a person to withdraw unless they go to a detox facility or a medical facility where they're detoxing from alcohol. So you would want to sustain the alcohol in their system to get until they get to where they need to be medically to be detoxed.
I've always wondered if I've ever seen a little.
What do you do at work, Tori?
That's interesting because think about it.
Keep them on the floors, like,
You sound excited about this. You want to tell us more?
Tori works at the hospital. She was curious why they have vodka in the hospital.
That is not for you.
But I guess that makes sense now that you say that. Think about when all the restaurants had to shut down and the essential and non-essential, and they allowed the beer distributors to stay open, and they said it was because of the alcoholics. So that makes sense. They would go through that withdrawal and wouldn't be able to get their alcohol. So for those out there that are saying, I don't understand why, this is why. That the beer distributor is essential. Okay, anything else? She's had a long 2 weeks. She's ready to go home. She's mentally exhausted now.
No, it's,
I fed her McDonald's. She's
Okay.
happy to do that.
that's true. That was a condition.
Carrie likes McDonald's.
Yes,
Love
I'm
McDonald's.
aware.
You've been with her long enough
Yes.
to know. Yeah.
Yes.
So I want to thank Carrie personally. Carrie and I worked together. We cried a lot together. We had a lot of experiences together. And I appreciate her thinking of our family and listening to the podcast. First of all, listening to them. And second of all, to make you aware of it. So thank you guys for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And
Thank you,
I
guys.
just do want to say, when I told my coworkers that I was doing this, I almost had a team of 8 therapists with me. They were like, let's go. I want to go. We're doing it. So if ever you need or want anybody else, I've got a team of people.
We're,
be awesome.
we're always
Do
looking.
that, yeah.
If they want to do it, like we talk now, we can do it. It doesn't have to be after work, late at night or whatever. Because anything that anybody can share is helping everybody. Like, it's not helping us any more than it's helping you. But just what you gave us today, I can only imagine to get insight from so many other people. So we're open to that. We have a list. You can see the chalk on his wall of people we're making appointments with. So definitely, we're going to definitely take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And we can travel. They don't have to come here. Like, we can take some of this stuff. So if you have like
Okay.
a meeting room or whatever down there, we can obviously travel.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Me?
What about like a patient? Is that something you would do? Like somebody that's in our
Yeah.
facility? If they would be willing to, like, sign waivers and things to be able to,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
somebody who's like currently in treatment wanting
Yep.
to.
Yeah, and I've actually spoke in rehabs and stuff. Lots of times they want to hear the other side. One of the thoughts was, to your point, like when you go there and you hear speakers, even at these AA meetings that you attend or they attend, like you go to these meetings and you hear each other's story. And often somebody will say, I wonder how the mother feels. Like I was at a meeting as a support person, and someone said, I just went to a funeral day. I'm so tired of looking at these mothers. I can't imagine what they're going through and how they feel. And I'm like, bingo, you know. I'm not going to raise my hand because obviously when I went to these meetings, I respected that these people were there. They had the problem. I was just a spectator, not really a spectator, but a support person. And so I always let them speak. But then after the meeting, I would go up and say, I'm that mother. Like, I'm that parent that you're talking about. And let me tell you how it feels. And let me tell you what it did to the family. And, like, they appreciate that. You know, I was always a little leery. Like, people would look like, what are you doing here? Like, you're an outsider. But they never made me feel that way. And all the meetings that I went to, they were, like, grateful. And I knew when to talk and when to just sit there. But it was such a learning experience for me. We had a father who came, and I gave him kudos. He was not an alcoholic, but he just stood up and he said, all I want to say is keep doing what you're doing, people, because I lost my daughter. I found her on the bathroom floor last week. And I was like, kudos to him. Like, he's doing what I was doing. I came there to learn, like, why did this happen and what can we do about it? And so it's great. I think a patient would be awesome. To share their story and tell us how they feel.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, we can, like I said, we can travel. Maybe not all of us, but a few of us can definitely do that.
Some of the patients we have, you definitely all want to try because they have some incredible stories.
It's a road trip, and you never hear the same story. Like, and you never get tired of hearing the stories. Like, every podcast, it's a different person, and it's crazy how people come out and say, oh yeah, I'm a user, and you would have never guessed. And it's that stigma thing. They kept it quiet. And kudos to the people that are reaching out and now telling us, you know what, I have addiction. And I didn't want to tell anybody about it, but because you're sharing your stories and people are talking, I'm willing to share my story.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and it can be anonymous. Some people don't. We had one person here who chose not to use his name, and that we just bleep that out, and he can still feel comfortable. So great. Awesome, good.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys coming on.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Definitely learned a lot.
I'm glad.
Allie was nervous.
I was.
It's all right.
She was nervous.
But once we start talking, like, it's fun. It's like fun.
As soon as Dylan got on the
nervous
choice thing,
for
you were
it?
nervous.
That's what I was gonna say. Nervous to meet me or nervous for the podcast?
On the way over here, she was like, oh my God, I hope Dylan's not there. And I'm like, why not? I'll be nice. And she's like, I don't think you will.
I know how you are.
The
Did he bring that? I'm the same way. So
He broke the ice.
The crazy thing is that me and him sound similar on the
Yeah.
podcast, so you can't tell.
Yep.
So I gotta start telling him, hey, that's Dylan speaking over there.
Don't be mad at me.
Awesome.
All right, guys.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
yeah, thanks for listening to the podcast.